What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of How to Get Away with the JD. We are in the end game now of season 2. We're almost there. It's crazy. This episode and then one more, and we're done. We're done. So I promised you guys to end the season, we were going to talk about some fun, elite, heavy topics, different things like that. And I think this topic is pretty important to anybody who's interested in law school, anybody in law school, or anybody like myself who's about to be out of law school. Money is a big thing. It makes the world go round, right? So with me today, I have a special guest, and we're going to talk about how to finance your JD, basically. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we're going to dive right on in.
And my name is Andy Babitz. I am a financial advisor and attorney with the Babitz Financial Group here in St. Louis. We affiliate with Northwestern Mutual, and we work with three types of people that are young professionals with high income potential, business owners, and people on the doorstep of retirement. And every one of those groups provides a different, challenge and different opportunities. And we are always looking for great people.
I love it. Yes. So we have Andrew here because he is going to talk about, he's done it all, right? Like he's got the JD, practiced, made the career change. So we're going to talk about all of it. But I think the first thing that we have to talk about for my students who are interested in law school, they're taking the LSAT, looking for money, trying to weigh what schools are at the end of the day going to work best for them. I know a lot of people say go to where you want to practice and other things, but money is a big financial barrier for a lot of students. What is something that you suggest for students who are starting the process to look at different schools in terms of finding money, what it looks like in balancing that option? What tips and tricks do you have for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's so many different ways to go about financing law school. The first thing I would tell you, and I would tell everyone, is you don't have to take out the max amount of loans that they tell you to take out, right? Somebody told me this when I was starting, and I wish I would have listened to them, which is when you're in law school, live like a law student. Don't live like a lawyer until you have that JD. And so, when you're looking, obviously, FAFSA is a great place to start. There are so many different opportunities for scholarships as well. So, whether you've survived, a cancer, God forbid, there's scholarships for that. Alumni associations, fraternities and sororities, different minority scholarships that are out there. I would tell you to be vigilant and become a student of the game. Right. There's so much out there on the internet that you can find. So, kind of your traditional ways, obviously, or you're going to get law school grants or scholarships. But most of you are going to finance law school with student loans. And so, understanding what that means is really important. Really, really important. And obviously there are direct unsubsidized loans, which means that the government is not subsidizing the rate of the interest. And then there are subsidized loans in which the government is. And the difference is just a higher or lower interest rate there. Does that answer your question?
I think so, but it also raises another question. I know a lot of students, going in undergrad and things. So if you financed your undergrad with student loans and things, you probably have heard of the Parent Plus loan, direct, unsubsidized. You've heard of these terms and probably still don't know what they mean or exactly how they affect you in the long run. Myself personally, I have a couple of loans for law school that I did not necessarily have to do in undergrad because of scholarships on top of the scholarships and things that I have. So let's break this down for students when it comes to choosing between the direct and the unsubsidized. What are, in your opinion, what are things that they should be looking at and considering? Because you're right, they don't have to take out the max amount, but they do want to do things, want to take out enough to make sure that the bills are covered, they have enough here and there. What are some of those tips in making the best decision possible so they're not in a bind afterwards?
100%. So, when you think about it, right, there's a difference between going to school at NYU and going to school at Mizzou where you're at, right? And the difference is, what's your rent? $800-900 a month, right? Good luck finding a closet in New York City for less than $2,000 a month. So, you have to understand what you're looking for, right? The direct unsubsidized loans, you can borrow up to about 21, 22 grand a year. And so that, that is where you start. And then the direct plus are on top of that. And that is in accordance with kind of the school that you're going to, if that makes sense, right? You're not going to be able to get a $50,000 direct plus loan from a public university as you would from a private university. And so understanding the interest rates too, right? We live in a very low interest rate environment, and for some god awful reason, student loan rates are still in the 5s and 6s. And so you think about the cost of that. I'll give you a little bit of an example. So in between my second and third year of law school, I had a buddy in the Peace Corps, and he was down in South America. And I was like, oh, I've got these loans. I'll go see him. It'll be a great trip. Now, it was an awesome trip. Cost me about $3,500 at the time, but at 6.8% interest, and I haven't paid off all my student loans yet, that trip actually cost me about $5,500 when you think about the compounding cost of interest. So that's something that you really have to think about in how you take out these loans. And then the other thing you have to think about, and it's really hard as a pre-law student, is what kind of law do you want to practice, right? And do you want to grind it out in a 100-hour-a-week big firm job where you're going to make 6 figures, or do you really have an altruistic goal with your JD to work in public defender or public city prosecutor or work in a nonprofit? And if you do, there are government programs that are going to help you from a public student loans forgiveness, which we'll get into. But obviously, I wouldn't go to a super expensive private school if I wasn't going to possibly use that school to land me and leverage me some type of job that's going to pay me the money that I need to pay these back.
I think you also bring up a really good point that I used to recruit students. So, the conversation between public and private always comes up. And for some reason, I forget it when it comes to law school and money. There is a difference, right? Public schools and private schools are a little bit more hindered in ways, one way or the other, in terms of what you can actually get from them. And then you start to factor in, okay, well, how am I making up the gap in between them with scholarships, outside scholarships, loans, different things like that. And I think you just brought up something really interesting, is what is your end goal, right? A lot of students going in are either first generation and don't know what their end goal is, or are like, oh, I think that sounds good. But then they get a taste of it and it's like, okay, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And now it's a complete 180. And now we're trying to figure out, what are we doing? What are we doing? So for those students who may not know how they want to leverage their JD in the future, what is something that you think they should be cautious about when it comes to taking out this money? Because it's no guarantee that they're going to get the 6-figure paying job, or like, so
for sure. No. And so first, as you think about this, right, if you are even taking any pause in law school consideration, stay in the federal loan market. Do not go private, right? And what I mean by that, right? Federal loans are those direct loans, those direct subsidized, the Stafford, the Grad Plus, anything that has a Department of Education tag to it, right? And those are owned by the Federal Education Department. And the reason I mean that is there are forgiveness programs, forbearance programs, things that are not going to come after you from a large credit score issue or garnishments and things from they're really going to have a tangible effect on you. The private loans are owned by private corporations, your Sally Mays and your things that your Discover cards, things of that nature. And so that's really important. And if you're having any hesitation, I would tell you to stay in a public setting. There's nothing wrong with transferring. It's not your JD is going to be from the school that you graduate from. And so if you choose to go to a public university first and then really decide later on in your 2 and 3L years to be in a private school, that's totally fine too. But if you go to a private school and you have $70,000 of loans and you realize after your first year that this isn't for you, you still have $70,000 of loans and you don't have a JD. So it's something you really have to think about.
Mm, that's hell, that gives me a lot to think about. And I went to the public school. So
Right, right. So, I mean, when I was making the decision in 2007, it was UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City, or St. Louis University, which was SLU, a private university. And the difference was the tuition at UMKC was $17K a year, and the tuition at SLU was about 44. Now, these have risen exponentially at that time, but they're both similarly situated law schools, and I chose the public one, and I have less debt because of it. But that you have to weigh that out in everything that you do.
I completely
Um,
agree.
yeah. So, the thing to think about too, right, is how are these going to be paid back, right? How are these loans going to be paid back? And how do we do that in a way that allows us to live our life, right? Allows us also to save for things like retirement and having a family. And so we'll get into that, but those are things that you really have to consider.
So advancing the timeline a little bit. So you've got your law school acceptance letter, you've settled on whatever public or private institution you're going to, and you've taken out your first set of loans for the 1L year. And here you are, maybe with a few dollars in scholarship, right? As a law student and journeying through law school, I mean, there are outside scholarships, right, that you can apply for and things, but then there's also other ways to get money. So in your experience, what helps a current law student to, kind of get it together a little bit? Okay, they got their foot in the door, but all right, now let's really get the ball rolling. We have some things to think about. The time clock has started to the end.
100%. So if you're a pre-law student or you're in your first year, you obviously are a good student, and you have a system, right? And so I encourage everyone who's in a grad school setting to treat your loans like income, right? And so you get that first check maybe in August, and it's for X amount of dollars. Well, that's going to have to last you until the next check comes at the beginning of the next semester, right? And so if it's August and you're not going to get that next check till January, you got August, September, October, November, December. You got 5 months, and you need to break that down and budget. Okay, so I've got rent this month. I've got groceries. I've got bills, right? The last thing you want to do as a law student, and I've seen it because I work with a lot of lawyers from a financial perspective, is they come out of law school with $20,000 of credit card debt, and that's not forgivable by the federal government. And so having a budget, having a realistic budget and sticking to it is really important. Now, they tell you that you can't work your first year of law school, right? You want to talk about pigeonholing people, right? You got to take out loans. You can't have a job. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you not to work. But law school, that first year is definitely a job that you need to focus on. Now, in your second and third year, there's a lot of opportunities to clerk and make money to supplement what you're already doing. But if you're that type of person who can hustle and wait tables or bartend, I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly not to do that, right? You've got to do you. And just because they tell you you can't work doesn't mean that you shouldn't take some responsibility and do that.
I completely agree with that. My first year, I worked on campus. So I think I had the one job, my 1L year coming in. I found a spot that I used to work at in undergrad. They still had a position open. So I got to work. They worked around my schedule, given the limitations of your 1L year, and you can only work X amount of hours. But I knew for myself, I didn't want to use like my loan money for like gas and things, in the idea of budgeting, right?
Right.
That I think is very important because you get this money, you have it from August to end of December, beginning of January, however long it is before the next rollout comes. And so you're trying to survive. And for me, I like to have the money without needing the money. So I was working and, doing this, doing that. So yeah, it was hard to do on top of like all your 1L classes and wanting to do like the social events because you want to get to know your classmates and things. But I still think it's manageable. So for anybody who is thinking about maybe not working or considering the working route, I do encourage it within limitations, but you kind of have to know yourself, which is the only caveat there, because it does not work for everybody.
100%. It's a great, mindset to have there, Phelan, which is, if your number one priority as a law student in your first year is getting those grades, right? It's getting the work done. But at the same time, if you are doing that and still able to make a little bit on the side, it's only going to help you down the road, because what happens is your student loans, you get the interest starts to accrue on them right when you graduate. Doesn't matter, even though you haven't even taken the bar yet. Obviously, this is in a non-pandemic setting, but in a normal year, your interest starts the day you graduate.
Joy.
You know what? It's really incredible, right? And I remember in 2007, they told us, well, the average student, comes out making 80 to 90 grand. And right in the middle of my second year, the financial crisis hit and they weren't handing out internships. So it was a little bit of a different situation. I'm sure everyone who's in law school right now is going through that. And, very, very difficult times to be in the law. That's for sure. But I can tell you this, right? Those of you who are thinking, look, I want to go to law school, but I'm not 100% on being a lawyer. Having that JD is a 100% marketable tool that will open a door for you wherever you go. So it's not pigeonholing you into being a lawyer for the rest of your life. The business world really loves JDs, the finance world, accounting world, all of these different settings are good use of what you learn really in your first year, which is how to think logically.
Yep. Completely agree, 100%. I tell people all the time, probably one of the most transferable degrees you can get is a JD. Is it expensive? Yes. Yes, it is. Worth it. Maybe. We'll see what happens, right?
100%. And I can tell you this, in the real world, nobody cares what your grades were in law school, and nobody cares where your paper that says you were a JD is from. Okay. It may be that key, that door opening into the next step, but it's just like anything else. It's how good are you at your craft, and what kind of worker are you going to be for that firm or that company that employs you right out the gate.
So we've talked a little bit about like the beginning and current journey for law students, right? And I still think in there's some things that we can unpack a little bit. What are some mistakes that you see students entering, or some of the common mistakes that you've seen students entering law school and students in law school commonly make, which hurts them and sets them back once they start to begin the exiting half of the journey, right?
100%. So again, to hit this type of topic, right? Just because you have access to loans doesn't mean you need to take it, right? And so, study abroad programs are really cool, but they also cost a lot of money. Going to China and going to Ireland and going to Australia are great experiences, but you're going to have to pay for that on the back end. So that is one, I would call, not mistake, but a choice that is made. The mistakes, I think, are made when people think that they need to live like lawyers in law school, which is buying designer clothes, getting bottle service at the club, going out and spending $300 on a steak dinner at Capitol Grill because you finished finals. Like, those are things that are just not, in my opinion, worth it. Now, if you want to spend the $300 that you made from your job doing that, I'm totally okay with that. But using that credit card and not paying those balances, those are the mistakes that I see from my end as a financial advisor, and from some of my peers who came out and were really into a hole right out the gate.
Yes, I'm not going to throw any names out there. I know some people who have done those things. So
yeah. And there's nothing wrong with driving a beater while you're in law school, right? I mean, you don't need to buy a Beamer or a Mercedes while you're in law school. I've seen it done. I've seen it done. It's just not, it's not worth it, guys. It just isn't.
What? Okay, that's interesting. So before we transition to what I think is probably going to be the most interesting half of the conversation, right? Which is after law school. Like, what does that look like? Do you have any final tips for any pre-law and current law students that they should be considering when it comes to this money journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, so many times in anything that we do in life, we're looking for that, somebody to tell us where to go, right? And how to do it. And obviously finding a mentor is key. Finding somebody that you trust who is in law school now, who may have made a mistake before that, and having a real conversation with them about what this actually entails is really, really important. That's number one. And then number two, you have to kind of take some self-responsibility in these loans. I remember sitting through that, this is your loan and this is what it means, just being like, man, F that. Like, I got this. I'm going to come out top 10, be making six figures. This doesn't matter to me. You have to take a hold of it and have some self-responsibility on these loans, because they are going to be tied to you when you graduate. They are going to affect your credit score. They are going to affect your ability to get a mortgage. They are going to affect your cash flow on a month-to-month basis. And so every dollar that you take out is important, and having self-responsibility behind that is really key.
Love that. You said mortgage. I got triggered. All right, cool. Awesome. It is what it is. So moving forward, 3L, ready to leave, getting out into the world. You might have an exit conversation with your financial director, financial aid director, whoever at school, or you may not, right? And so then the question becomes, okay, I'm leaving, maybe with a job in corporate, big law, public interest. What's next?
What is next?
They're coming, knocking on the door, ready to take your ready to give back what you owe them. Yes. So what does that look like? What in that period between, when it's time to start paying, what should people start to do or start to think about when it comes to the loans that they've potentially taken out?
100%. And so, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I would do in a non-pandemic setting, because just so we're all on the same page here right now, because of what's happening with coronavirus, everybody's loans are on pause. Everybody's federal loans are on pause, meaning 0% interest, no accumulation, no need to pay. And so I want to be clear on that. But in a normal world where we're all not wearing masks and getting shots, there are the first thing you have to think about is, how are you going to pay these off, right? And there are different ways in which to do it. You can do, a 10-year payoff, which is kind of the standard payoff, which I would tell you the majority of people are not in a position to do, because it's a significant outlay, right? And then you have kind of your pay as you go, which is based on income. And then you have kind of a 20 or a 25-year payoff. And this is if you are not going to get your public student loan forgiveness. Okay. And we'll talk about that. I want to put a pin there so we can get back to that. But if you are going to pay it off in a certain amount of time, the 10-year, the 20, or the 25-year, you're going to get an interest payment, and they're going to take all of your loans and put them towards, called consolidation. Okay. And so your direct, your unsubsidized, your Stafford will all get put into one, and you'll pay one monthly payment over the next 10, 20, or 25 years. If you're in the private sector and you have the ability to do this, at least to start, that would be my recommendation. Okay. Does that make sense? And the reason being is you're actually going to pay these things off. Okay. You're actually going to have an end date. And within that, right, if you're a year or two out of law school and you are making money and you have predictable income and good credit and things of that nature, I've helped a lot of people refinance their student loans into a lower payment. Now, when you do that, you lose the forbearance protection and the everyone who's in a private student loan right now that's with SoFi or Earnest or Credible, those payments are not getting in forbearance or deferment right now. But that would be my suggestion for those people in the private sector who have the cash flow to do that. We'll stop there for a second, and let me ask if there's any clarifications or questions on that, Phelan.
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody, well, okay, I know some people do, but not everybody does. Because I know this was something when we first had this conversation at the academic and leadership retreat, blew a lot of people's mind when it comes to, oh, okay, what is the benefit of consolidating? Is there a real benefit to refinancing if I'm losing these protections here and there? So in your opinion, for a student, let's just say a student who comes out with a decent paying job, we'll say maybe $70,000 a year annually. They have transitioning in life. So let's say they want to buy a house. They live in an average market in the Midwest.
Sure.
What does that look like for them in terms of trying to figure out, okay, should I go straight out the gate and consolidate my loans? Should I leave them where they are for a little while? Should I do the forbearance? Break that down for in a hypothetical situation.
Absolutely. So, it all depends kind of on cash flow, right? And so if you look at the 25-year straight consolidation payoff is usually going to be the lowest monthly outlay, if that makes sense, other than the income-based repayment. And I'll get to that here in a second, right? But if you're actually going to want to make a dent in your principal and actually pay them off someday, that's important to understand. So that would be one thing that I think about. At $60,000 to $70,000 a year, I may look at income-based repayment as well. Income-based repayment takes a percentage of what your total taxable income was for the year previous, and you pay 10% of that towards your student loans in the next year. Right now, it used to be, before this last American Recovery Act, that everything that was forgiven by the federal government 20 years down the road was a taxable event. Okay, so for example, Phelan, let's say you took out $100,000 of student loans, and you graduate in 2021, and you do the income-based repayment, and in 2041, your principal you've paid down is $60,000, but you have $40,000 of loans out there that the government is going to forgive, right? It used to be that you had a taxable event. You'd get a 1099 for $40,000 in 2041, which was a major burden, right? Okay, even at 25% a tax bracket, that's an $8,000 tax hit on that 40K. Okay, and so with this new Recovery Act, they have put in, it was Elizabeth Warren, I believe, and someone else who tucked in a little clause that said that all of that money that was forgiven is actually going to be tax-free. Okay, and there's two reasons they did that. Number one, obviously, is the public policy of it, but number two is to set the stage for future forgiveness being tax-free. Now, because, and again, I'm getting a little bit into the weeds here, but because it was passed through reconciliation, meaning it was a straight Democratic pass. There was no Republican support on it. It was passed through budget reconciliation. It expires at the end of the current budget, which is January 1 of 2026. So it's not a permanent fix. So we're keeping our eye on that as financial advisors and as just general human beings to keep a hold of whether or not that's going to be taxable. I went down a rabbit hole there, but understanding the income-based repayment, the income base is not likely to get things paid off. It's more of just a placeholder for you to not put out more than you need to from an income perspective towards your student loans. Is that helpful? Does that answer the question?
I think so. But then I also have a question because this is something I've seen on both ends between people who go on for advanced degrees and people who graduate strictly undergrad and leave it there. Can you change what you do at any given time with your loans? I know people who will enter the income driven plan because I had the income driven plan because I knew I wasn't going
Sure.
to stay in that role and coming back to school. So it made sense for me not to dent my account too much. Can you change your plan type at any time after, graduation? What does that look like?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. And that's why I definitely recommend for those who may have a cash flow issue out of law school, right? Maybe you have a kid, maybe you have other obligations, right? Definitely income based is a great way to go. And you can always make that change, whether it's through the the federal loan programs that are subsidized and give you those kind of backstop protections of deference and forbearance. You can definitely do that. You can also refinance at any time. I'm going to make a plug here. I don't make anything off of this, trust me, but a great website for those who are looking at the refinance market is a website called gradfin.com, gradfin.com. They are a clearinghouse for mostly advanced degrees. So med students, law students, dental students, veterinary students. And what they do is they find the best rate for the private refinance, and they'll put you inside of that plan, and they don't charge you anything for it. And so it's a non-biased, really, good approach to refinancing. Now, I am always a proponent of refinancing. The only problem with refinancing, again, like I said, is that you lose that federal protection. So I'll give you an example. I had a client who was at a 7% interest rate on his student loans. And we refinanced in January of 2020 down to 3.5% using GradFin. Great move, saved him a lot of money, but then the pandemic hit and all of these things, he lost all those protections. Now, fortunately for him, he's in a job where he's still making money and all of that. But those are the things that you have to be cognizant of if you're making that decision.
It's actually really interesting. Okay. Okay. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break because we threw a lot at you. We want to make sure that you're getting your notes down, making sure you got it all written down. So we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back and get into some more of the financial questions before we get out of here. So sit tight. All right, guys. And so we are back with more information. Before we get further in on some of the other topics, Andrew, talking about the income-based payments, right? What makes sense in terms of, hey, I make this amount of money. Should I still be doing income-based? How long should I be doing income-based payments? What does that look like?
Absolutely. And so, as you grow as an attorney, right? Whether it's in the actual traditional legal market or you're in-house or you're working for a company, you're going to start making more money. Trust me, I've seen it. My friends who we graduated in 2010, I would say the majority of them are in a comfortable position now, even though a lot of us struggle. I mean, my first job out the gate was $52,500 right out. So, you come a long way from that. But as your income starts to rise, every year that you look at your income-based repayments, I would also look at what it would be to not be in an income-based repayment. And you can check that out on studentaid.gov/login and make sure that you are up on that. And if you get to a point where your income-based repayments are more than what you would pay just to pay it off in a certain period of time, well, then it makes sense to switch. Now, again, I'm going to put a caveat on that. If you're 10 to 12 years into your income-based repayments and you haven't made a huge dent on your principal, you may want to stay in that income-based repayment, right? Because you only have to do that for 20 or 25 years. And so it becomes a calculation. And what I always tell people is math doesn't lie. And so it's just making sure that we're understanding that. And so another factor to consider is, okay, well, I'm going to be working at this firm, but it's only because it's the job that I got now, and I'm going to make sure that a couple of years from now I'm in a place where I'm going to be earning more. if you think you're going to double your salary in the next 5 years, then I would steer clear of the income-based repayments, because those are going to jump real quick. Okay. The other thing that we chatted about was public student loan forgiveness, right? And that's something that a lot of people, ask me about. It's kind of that unicorn, out there where you only have to pay for 10 years, right? And so the qualifications for public student loan forgiveness are that you're either working for the government or a qualified 501c3. And a 501c3 is a nonprofit entity. Now, all of us in the legal market can appreciate this from a gray area, right? But all of your friends who are in med school who are going to come out making $400,000 and $500,000 after their residency, if they work for, say, the University of Missouri hospital system, well, that's a 501c3, and they get public student loan forgiveness, which, yeah, I see your jaw dropping there. So it's crazy to think about. Now they don't make any real money until they're 33 or 34, but still, it's a great program for them. Where as a lawyer, there's really not a lot of places where you're going to be working for a 501c3 or a government entity where you're earning six figures. But for those of you who are going to do the public defender route, or the prosecuting office, even clerkships count. But you have to have 120 months of payments in the public student loan forgiveness, which is 10 years, right? Now those can be broken up. So I have friends and people who, let's say they clerked for 2 years, and then they went private practice, and then they went to go work for, say, the attorney general or something along those lines. You can pick back up those payments at any time. So it's important to note that. For those of you who are not in law school now, let's say you're out of law school and you're in an income-based repayment or a public student loan forgiveness right now, even though you are making $0 payment to the government, every month still counts towards that 120 months towards your public student loan forgiveness, or those 240 or 300 months on the income base. So everybody I've talked to who's in income-based or public student loan forgiveness, we are advising, do not pay anything right now during this time, because you're not making any payments and it's counting towards your eventual payoff.
That's interesting. I'm also really upset about that med school thing. I knew I picked wrong. I did.
Always.
Damn it.
Right. Here's the good thing, right? If you went straight through law school, you're going to start making money at 25 and 26, right? If you're in med school, you've got 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of med school, 4 years of residency where you work like a doctor and get paid nothing. Then you have a fellowship. So, that's your only consolation, right?
That's true. When you put it like that, fair points are being made. But I think you brought up some really good stuff for people to think about. But I also want to come back to the refinancing thing. So we've talked about, what it looks like for consolidating, or especially right now, since everybody's on pause, not paying and figuring things out moving forward, refinancing your student loans. What exactly does that look like? And what are some of the healthier benefits for people to consider in refinancing? Because I know a lot of people hear about it a lot, and we talked about it a little bit, but there's some other things that I think people should probably consider when it comes to refinancing and who they should do it through.
Absolutely. So refinancing is really just all about, what is your goal with this student loan, right? If it is to pay it off as quickly as possible, great. Refinance is a really good option. If the goal is to lower the monthly payment and still pay it off in the same amount of term, repayment is a great option, right? And so again, it's all math, right? And so I have a spreadsheet, as I'm a nerd, right, that I build for these things. Okay. And so what I do is, look, if you have $100,000 worth of student loans, right, and you're at a 6.8%, rate, right, over the next, 20 years or so, your total payments are going to be significantly more than $100,000, right? But if you can cut that to 4%, which is very, very plausible in today's refinance world, you're going to save tens of thousands of dollars over the life of the loan, and you may pay it off quicker. So I'll give you kind of a real life example. So I graduated UMKC in 2010, and I had $135,000 of student loan debt. And I was making $52,500 a year, right? So I was in the 25-year plan where my payments were about $450 a month, and it was going to take me 25 years to pay those things off. Well, 5 years into my legal career, I got into a job where I was making, six figures. I was earning more money. Obviously I had a wife and kids at that point, so I had more expenses, but I refinanced from 8% to 5%. And I cut my refinance, I cut the time down significantly, almost in half. My payments jumped up from 450 to 600, but at the end of 2022, I will have all of my student loans repaid. Thank you. Only 12 years later. But that's the, if you up your payments and lower the interest rates, you cut your years down significantly. But as we've said, right, you lose those protections. I have had to pay every month during this pandemic, because now I'm okay with that, right? And so it's just something that you have to think about when you're doing that refinance. If that makes sense. I'll give you an example of the spreadsheet here. Just let's see here if I can pull that up. Here. So if we think about just kind of the overall cost here, and I don't know if I can share my screen.
You should be able to.
Okay. So if we see here, right, if we have $100,000 of student loans and it's going to be a 6.8% interest rate, and we're paying on 200 payments, right? Let's pump it up to 240. Let's say it's 200 years, right? Or excuse me, 20 years, right? So that minimum payment's going to be $763 a month. That will pay off 100,000 at 6.8%. So total, look at that total cost, 183 on 100,000. That's interest, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a pain in the butt. So let's say we are able to refinance down to 4.5%. We could pay $633 a month, okay? And if we made the extra payment just in the same amount as our minimum payment on 6.8%, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we're still paying $763, but we're at 4.5%. We're going to cut 5 years off of our payments. So we're going to pay it. It's only going to take 180 months instead of 240. We're only going to pay 137,000 out of 100, and we're going to save $45,000 in interest over the life of that loan. So these are the kinds of conversations that you have when you're thinking about refinancing. It's all about math and all about what you can do from that perspective. If you're already able to pay this 763 and you have a stable job, why wouldn't you refi down to here to save, basically would be a nice, SUV for you and your family, down the road.
But that's really good. I like the tangible example of actually seeing that work in progress, right? So then the question becomes, who do you refinance through? How do you have the conversation of refinancing? What does that exactly look like?
Absolutely. So, once you all graduate, you will get a letter a week from every single refinance company in the marketplace, because the federal government sells that information on your behalf. I personally have had a really good experience with Earnest, which is a good company, but again, I've also heard really good things about SoFi and Credible, and some of the other ones out there. Like I said, using GradFin as a tool, and I'll just share their website here just so you can have an idea of what it looks like. It's really easy, and lights are going out here. But this is a great tool to help yourself in a refinance setting. You can create a profile. You will have somebody reach out to you. It's somebody from the United States reaching out to you to help you counsel through this. Obviously credit scores are important. So, if you don't have a credit score and you don't have credit, these are honestly not options at this point. But they're going to look at things that it's really, really easy to get federal student loans, right? It's almost too easy, in my opinion, right? Like you don't have to qualify. All you have to do is show them a social security number and an acceptance letter, right? It's like, if anyone saw that movie, The Big Short, right? Mm-hmm. And they were having those conversations with those two sleazy mortgage brokers in Florida, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I specialize in the really poor immigrant market," right? And they're taking advantage of these people. That's what I feel like the federal government does in these loan situations, honestly, because people don't know what they're getting. True. In the private sector, they're going to underwrite you like you're just another person. They're not going to care where you came from or what you did. They're going to care what's on your balance sheet, what's your income, and what is your credit score.
Well, I think we've covered a good amount of information, and I think given a lot of, we don't get paid. Let me throw the disclaimer out. We're not getting paid by any of the companies that we've mentioned today.
No, 100%.
So this is all out of the goodwill of our hearts.
Yes. Although maybe Bubbly and North Face should pay us for coordinating our our drinks and our sweatshirts here, unintentionally.
I've been saying that I feel like I should be getting more sponsorships to pay some bills, but I mean, it's fine, whatever, it's cool. But I appreciate you, Andrew, a lot for stopping by and talking to people, because I think this is an area that is so taboo that people try to stay away from it. And then you get sprung on, and it's just like, whoa. So before we get out of here, what are some final tips, tricks for anybody starting law school, in law school, and about to leave law school that you would like for them to start thinking about and leave with them?
Absolutely. So it doesn't matter whether you're starting, whether you're in law school or out of law school, I really try to preach this 60-20-20 mentality. Okay. And that's in relation to your income, right? So spend 60% of your income on the essentials, right? Like rent, food, car payment, gas, things that you can't live without, right? 20% on savings. Okay. So as you get out of law school, building up an emergency fund, maximizing 401ks, IRAs, things of that nature, right? And then 20% on discretionary. And if you are doing the 60 and the other 20, that 20% discretionary can be used for what it's made for, discretionary. Journaling the budget, just like when you think about, right, if you're trying to work out or you're trying to lose weight, and you journal your food and your diet and your exercise, journaling your finances is really, really important. And again, like Phelan said, it's something people don't talk about, right? And so that is what I will leave you with, other than the fact of understanding every dollar that you spend in law school, right? If you're thinking about a 30-year payoff, could be 3 or 4 times that amount when you think about the interest.
I think that's the perfect pin. Right? Like that's so on that note, everybody.
Yes.
I want to thank Andrew for coming through and talking to us today about financing your JD and what that looks like afterwards. As always, guys, I appreciate you listening. We have one more episode before the season is over, so make sure you guys stay tuned. But as always, much love, peace, stay safe, and I will see you guys in the final episode. Peace.